I lived in an old bedroom, three-story walk-up in Toronto for a while in my early 20s. A few days after I moved in, my roommate Mike confronted me in the morning. He asked why I had been banging on the wall that separated our bedrooms and pacing back and forth across the apartment all night. Thing is, I hadn't done any of that. We figured he must have been dreaming, or maybe it was noise from another apartment in the building. It was an old place, and the walls weren't exactly soundproof. We shrugged it off and didn't think much of it. But it kept happening. Mike would bring it up every few mornings. Loud banging on the wall between our rooms, heavy footsteps walking back and forth across the apartment in the middle of the night. And every time he asked, I had the same answer. It wasn't me. Not long after that, I started noticing something strange in my own bedroom. At random times, the room would suddenly fill with this awful smell. The best way I can describe it is cheap women's perfume mixed with a damp, musty odor. Imagine old clothes left on a wet basement floor near a litter box that hasn't been cleaned in a while. That's what it smelled like. What made it worse was that I'd get this sudden feeling of dread a few moments before the smell showed up. No reason for it. Just a strong sense that something wasn't right. Then the smell would start. Mike ended up flaking out about 4 months into our 1-year lease, which left me covering the rent for the whole place until I could find another roommate. After he left, I decided to try sleeping in his room instead of mine. I was curious if whatever was going on would stop. The first night I slept in there, I had one of the most vivid nightmares I've ever had. In the dream, I was standing in the apartment bathroom. The room was dimly lit, and I was staring at the mirror over the sink. The mirror was cracked. I was holding a large shard of glass and cutting my own face with it while looking at my reflection. It felt incredibly real. After that night, the same things Mike had described started happening to me. Loud bangs during the night. The sound of someone walking around the apartment. Sometimes I'd hear the toilet flush in the bathroom when no one else was there. A few times I woke up to the bathtub running. The hot water would be turned all the way on, blasting into the tub in the middle of the night. One of the strangest things happened not long before I finally moved out. I woke up around 2 in the morning to the TV in my room blasting at full volume. It was an old analog TV, the kind where you turn a knob to change the channel or volume, and pull another knob to turn it on. There was no remote, but somehow the TV had turned itself on. And the movie playing on the screen was Poltergeist, airing on City TV. That channel used to run late-night movies all the time. But the fact that the one time my TV ever turned itself on in the middle of the night, it happened to be playing a movie like that. I moved out not long after. For a while, I lived in a really strange apartment. Technically, it was 2 rooms, but one of them was locked when I moved in. And I never had the key, so the entire place I actually had access to was basically one small room that served as the kitchen, dining area, and a bedroom plus a screened porch. The bathroom was across the hall from the locked room. Two things happened there that really stuck with me. One night, my girlfriend was staying over. In the middle of the night, she suddenly woke up and nudged me. She said she had seen the bathroom door open. Standing in the doorway was a shadowy figure, just watching her. The bathroom was directly across from the locked room. I never saw anything myself that night, but she was genuinely shaken. She wasn't the type to make things up, and the way she described it sounded like someone had just been standing there, looking at her from the bathroom. The other incident happened when I was asleep one night. I got jolted awake by the fire alarm in my apartment going off full blast. It was deafening. I jumped out of bed and went over to unplug it. But the moment I reached for it, the alarm stopped. And none of the other alarms in the building had gone off. A lot of other things that happened could probably be explained away as neighbors, but the way they happened was strange. I would hear knocking from the downstairs apartment. It sounded like someone tapping a spoon against a counter. That by itself wouldn't have been weird, except it would happen every couple of minutes for hours at a time. Sometimes it would just start in the middle of the night. I also heard knocking inside my own apartment walls. It sounded like someone slowly tapping their way up the wall, like they were searching for a stud with their knuckles. Then there was this weird moaning or howling sound that I could never figure out. It could have been a neighbor's dog, but it never sounded like it was coming from their apartment. The unit across mine had 3 different tenants the span of a year. I always wondered if they were experiencing the same things. Eventually, I came up with my own way of dealing with it. I started calling the ghost Pete. The name came from some old mail that would occasionally show up for a previous tenant. After a while, I just started talking to Pete like he was a roommate I wasn't particularly close with. Just casual stuff. My girlfriend thought the whole thing was creepy, but eventually stopped coming over because of it. So most of the time, it was just me in the apartment, anyway. But when I was there, talking to Pete actually made the place feel less tense. At one point, I even left out a sheet of paper on the table with Pete's notes, written at the top, and told him if he had any complaints about the apartment, he could just write them down. To this day, I'm not sure I fully believe in ghosts, but that apartment definitely pushed me a little closer to the idea that science probably doesn't know everything about how the universe works. This happened when I was 17 and still living in my childhood home. At the time, I had a habit of sneaking out late at night to meet up with my friends. One night, I slipped out through the back door. As I stepped outside and turned around to quietly close it, I suddenly felt like someone was watching me. My first thought was that I had been caught. I turned to see who it was. Standing there in the yard was the figure of a young girl. Everything about her was monochrome. Her hair was completely black, darker than anything around it. Her face looked washed out, almost like gray and white static on old TV screen. She was wearing a dress that was somewhere between those same colors. There were no facial features. just the shape of a girl standing there, facing me. I reached for the door as fast as I could. As I tried to shut it behind me, the door suddenly slammed closed much faster than I expected. I took off running through the yard and out to the street. The entire time I had this horrible feeling that something was following me. I ended up staying at my friend's house that night. Not long after that, something else strange happened in the house. My dad had recently passed away, and one night, my mom and I were up late watching a movie together. When it ended, we turned everything off. The TV, the stereo receiver, and the DVD player. All of them had separate remotes. We said goodnight and went to our rooms. A little while later, I was suddenly jolted awake by a loud burst of static. The TV was on, the speakers were cranked all the way up, and the screen was just showing a blank input. At the same moment, my mom and I had both stepped out into the hallway. We both had been woken up by the noise. There was no one else in the house. A few years later, when I was around 23 and had finished college, I finally told my family about what I saw that night in the backyard. As I was describing the girl, my sister suddenly stopped me and finished the description herself. She told me that when she was younger, she and one of her friends used to see a little girl playing in our backyard. The girl always wore a sundress and looked like she was around 12 years old. Later on, our neighbor, who had been the original owner of the house, told us about the family who first lived there after it was built. They had a young daughter who died from leukemia. She would have been around the same age. Looking back, the girl I saw never seemed threatening or harmful. My sister said she always felt the same way about her. I've never seen anything like that again. But there was one other thing I remember now. Our dog used to randomly stop in the hallway outside my sister's room and just stare down it. His hair would stand up and he would start growling at nothing. At the time it scared me, but I never connected it to what I saw in the backyard. Not until much later.